Hey there everyone, my name is Kyle, and this is my attempt at a Pokemon Fire Red Hardcore Nuzlocke. Before we get started, I'll go over the rules for anybody who may not be familiar with what the rules of a Hardcore Nuzlocke are. The rules are, any Pokemon that faints is considered dead and can never be used again. It either has to be permanently boxed or released. I have to nickname all of my Pokemon. I can only catch the first Pokemon that I encounter in a new area, excluding duplicates. Battles have to be on set mode. I'm not allowed to overlevel my Pokemon, and I cannot use any items in battle except for held items. So after Professor Oak says a bunch of words that I totally paid attention to, I name myself Blanco. And then he asks me to remind him what his grandson's name is. Well, I did what I had to do. I start to head north and head towards the tall grass until Professor Oak stops me and tells me to come back to his lab with him, where he wants to give me my first Pokemon. I decide to choose Bulbasaur and I nickname him Yuka, but then chooses a Charmander after complaining about not getting to pick first and then ending up with a type advantage. And then he decides to challenge me to a battle, which goes pretty poorly for me. Off to a great start. On attempt number 2, Yuka hits a critical hit tackle, while Charmander just goes for Growl. We defeat Butt, and Yuka gains a very nice 69 experience points. Professor Oak then asks me to run his errands for him, because he has no regard for child labor laws. I head up to Viridian City, and when I return with his parcel, he hands me 5 Pokeballs, and the challenge has officially begun. I head north to Route 1 where I encounter Rattata, and I catch him and name him Jerry. Jerry has a jolly nature, and the ability Guts, and that is very useful in the early game. After a bit of grinding, I head up to Route 22, and I catch a Mankey, and I name him after our fallen comrade, Harambe. Harambe has an adamant nature, which is plus attack and minus special attack, arguably the best possible nature he could have gotten, but for now, I don't plan on using him. I heal up and I return to Route 22, and Butt challenges us to another battle. I decide to lead off with Jerry against his Pidgey, and we trade hits until Jerry knocks it out with a quick attack. Unfortunately, Jerry took a little more damage than I anticipated, so I had to switch to Yuka. He goes for Scratch and then hits us with a critical hit Scratch on the next turn, as I set up a Leech Seed. Yuka is then able to heal enough HP and take out the Charmander. After an old man forces me to watch him catch a Weedle, I intentionally avoid the grass on Route 2 and head into Viridian Forest for a Galaxy Brain moment that I will explain very shortly. I do encounter a Caterpie, and I decide to name him Noodle. I make it through Viridian Forest, and my excitement, I head straight into the grass on Route 2 on the other side of Viridian Forest because for some reason, I'd convinced myself that there was a possibility I can run into a Nidoran there, but I run into a Pidgey. Because I hadn't checked to make sure that I can run into a Nidoran there, I just assumed I could. I take out my anger on Pidgey, and I decide to name it Poogie, after blaming it for all of my mistakes. I continue on to Pewter City, and I decide it's time to take on the first gym. Brock isn't really much of a match for us, and I don't bother leveling up all the way to the level cap because, as you can see, Yuka takes out both of his Pokemon with a single Vine Whip and earns us our first gym badge. After defeating the trainers on Route 3, I head into the grass and then I totally redeem myself and I encounter a Nidoran. Nidoking is an incredibly useful Pokemon, so I was pretty excited. I name the future king Arthur and continue on to the Pokemon Center, where a man sells me a Magikarp for $500 and then the game shames me for my poor spending habits. Mind your business. I decide to name her Sally, and for now, I don't plan on using her. I continue on to Mount Moon, and I run into a Zubat, and I name it the same thing everybody else does, Rona. While making my way through Mount Moon, Yuka evolves into an Ivysaur, and Arthur evolves into Nidorino. I find a Moonstone, and I decide now is the time to crown the king, and evolve him to a Nidoking. I then make the most important decision of the entire game. I bravely step forward, take a deep breath, and I choose the worst of the 2 fossils. The Dome Fossil. Why did I choose the worst of the 2 fossils, you may ask? Because I want you to go into the comment section and tell me how much of an idiot I am. Also, like and subscribe. I exit Mount Moon to find 2 guys having a staring contest. So I decided to walk right in this guy's line of sight and force him to teach Arthur the move Mega Punch. I decide to head up towards Nugget Bridge, where Butt is waiting to challenge us once again. This time he decides to cheat and he leads off with a level 17 Pidgeotto. I lead off with Jerry, whose Hyper Fang is about half. Pidgeotto then uses Sand Attack to lower Jerry's accuracy, but Jerry doesn't take kindly to cheaters, and he hits an unnecessary critical hit after taking a Quick Attack, knocking out his hacked Pidgeotto. But then sends out his own Jerry, who uses Quick Attack and brings us to about half. Jerry retaliates with another Hyper Fang, and Oko's the imposter. He then sends out his Charmander, and I decide it's worth staying in and risking a crit, and I do about 2/3 with another Hyper Fang. Charmander does indeed go for Ember and leaves us with just 5 HP, so it's time to switch out, and I send in Arthur, who takes an Ember like a champ and then kicks Charmander twice in the face and knocks it out, but sends in his final Pokemon in an act of desperation, an Abra, who only knows the move Teleport, so Arthur punches it in the face and we earn the victory. I'm still a bit underleveled for the next gym, so I decide to continue up Nugget Bridge, where Jerry ends up evolving into Eradicate. Then when I was taking on the 5th trainer, his Mankey uses a Leer, and then hits us with a 5 attack Fury swipes with 2 critical hits and takes Yuka down to just 1 HP. Wow. If I hadn't set up a Leech Seed with Yuka, he would have died right there, right before the water gym, and that would have been absolutely devastating. After healing, I continue on to Route 24 where I run into Abra. Fortunately, Sleep Powder is able to connect, and I'm able to catch her. I name her Bellatrix. Unfortunately, Bellatrix has the absolute worst possible nature, plus defense, minus special attack. Kadabra is very powerful, in spite of not being able to fully evolve, but with the minus special attack nature, I decide, for now, I'm not going to train her. I then continue on to Route 25 and I catch an Oddish that I name Sprouts. After grinding up to the level cap, I teach Yuka the TM for Bullet Seed that I found in Mount Moon, and I decide to take on Misty. She leads off with Staryu, who outspeeds us but just goes for Harden, and Yuka takes it out with 3 hits from Bullet Seed. She sends out her Starmie, who hits us with a couple of Swifts, but a combination of Bullet Seed and Leech Seed from Yuka take down her Starmie, and we earn our 2nd badge. I head back to Route 25, and this guy who swears to us he isn't a furry asks us for help. We decide to help him out, and he rewards us with a ticket to the SS Hand. I head down to Route 5, and I get a very important encounter, a Meowth. I'll explain why a bit later on. I catch her, and I name her Mona. After getting to Vermilion City, I head over to Diglett's cave where I catch a Diglett and horrendously misspell the word thimble because I couldn't be bothered to Google it. I head to the SS Anne, and after battling some trainers, we make our way towards the captain's quarters and Butt challenges us to another battle. There isn't really much to say about this one, as Jerry just takes out his entire team with Hyperfang, and we get an easy victory. I continue on to find a man who's clearly chosen the wrong profession. After an uncomfortable encounter that I would later describe to my therapist, he gives me the HM for cut, and I can now take on the 3rd gym. This battle's pretty uneventful as well, as Arthur's ground typing in combination with the TM for Dig that we had just picked up makes this a pretty easy win. After getting the HM for Flash, I head over to Rock Tunnel, and I catch Feathers the Spearow, and an Ekans whom I rudely misgender and name Snecky Boy. In Rock Tunnel, I encounter the worst Pokemon in the entire game, Onyx, who I appropriately name Gross, and make my way through to Lavender Town. This next part of the game is where I get quite a few team members. Now, remember that Meowth that I caught on Route 5? Here's why he was so important. On Routes 8 and 9, the only Pokemon that appear in the grass are Meowth, Pidgey, Ekans, Oddish, and Growlithe. Meowth isn't the only important Pokemon as you can see, but I love cats, so I wanted to give it a shout out. Because I managed to catch all of them prior to this route, the only possible encounter I have left is Growlithe. I catch him, and I name him Bowie, and then add Bowie straight to the team. I head over to Celadon City, where I walk into this guy's classroom and steal his Eevee, and I name him Baxter. Baxter has a sassy nature, plus special defense and minus speed. Not great, but because I plan on evolving him into a Jolteon, he's still very likely to outspeed the majority of the Pokemon we're going to run into, so the extra bulk actually ends up being pretty nice. I then head over to Route 16, and I name the 2-headed bird after a 3-headed dog, Cerberus. Unfortunately, Cerberus has a modest nature, plus special attack and minus attack, the absolute worst possible nature it can have. I consider using the Spearow that I caught earlier because of the poor nature, but in spite of that, I stick with Cerberus and add him to the team. I get the HM for Fly, which I teach to Cerberus, and then I head back into the city and get the coin case because apparently there's no age restriction on gambling in Kanto. I then head to the game corner, where I develop an unhealthy gambling addiction. Wouldn't be the first time. But eventually I get enough coins to get the TMs for Flamethrower and Thunderbolt, which I teach to Bowie and Baxter so I can use the Firestone and Thunderstone that I bought at the department store to evolve them into an Arcanine and a Jolteon. I decide to head back to Pokemon Tower and challenge Butt to another battle. I decide to lead with Baxter against his Pidgeotto and take it out with a Thunderbolt. Then for some reason he sends in Gyarados, who also gets taken out by Thunderbolt. Great job. Next up is Execute, and I switch into Bowie. He misses a Hypnosis, and we take it out with a Flamethrower. Kadabra comes in next, and I contemplate going for Dig because of Kadabra's low special defense, and Bite because it's super effective. However, I decide to go with Flamethrower, which leaves him in the red, but he just uses Kinesis, and Bowie finishes him off with a Bite. Last up is his Charmeleon, but he can't really do much to Bowie, so Bowie lands a Dig and then a critical hit Bite, and we win the battle once again. I take out some Rocket Grunts in the Rocket Hideout, as well as some of the trainers that I had skipped over on Route 8, and grind the new team members up a bit. After doing so, I head over to Celadon Gym to take on Erica. I spent hours strategizing for her team, and I think I came up with a pretty solid plan. I lead off with Bowie, and I use Flamethrower 3 times and knock out all 3 of her Pokemon. She realizes she's no match for my brilliance, and she admits defeat, earning us our 4th badge, as well as a TM for Giga Drain. I make my way back to the Rocket Hideout and take on Giovanni for the first time. His first 2 Pokemon are Onix and Rhyhorn, so Yuka takes them both down with Razor Leaf. Last up is his Kangaskhan. I leave in Yuka to set up a Leech Seed, but he uses Bite and we flinch. He then goes for Tail Whip and we use Leech Seed. I swap in Arthur, who gets crit by a Mega Punch on the switch in and drops him down to just 12 HP and heals up to 25 after the Leech Seed. I'm still too low, so I switch in Bowie so I can get the Intimidate off, and he just goes for a bite. Bowie gets healed back to full HP from Leech Seed, and then he gives him a taste of his own medicine and hits a critical hit Flamethrower, and we defeat Giovanni. I head back to Lavender Town and I catch a Ghastly that I named Spectre. I defeat the Marowak and the Team Rocket Grunts, and Cerberus evolves into a Dodrio, so at least his name makes a little bit more sense now. We rescue Mr. Fuji, and he gives us the Pokeflute. At this point of the game, the team is pretty strong, and I have quite a few Pokemon in the PC, so I'll be skipping over the unimportant encounters to save some time. After defeating some fishermen on Route 12, Yuka hits level 32 and evolves into Venusaur. I continue on and I wake up Snorlax with a Pokeflute, who, like me, gets pretty angry when somebody wakes him up, and he attacks us. Now, because I'm no Nuzlocke expert, I'm choosing to do Fire Red because it's a relatively easy run. However, I don't want to make it too easy on myself, and I do decide to ban Snorlax from the run. Snorlax is an incredibly powerful Pokemon, it's very bulky, and it hits like a truck. And for whatever reason in this generation, Ghost moves are a physical attack, and he can learn the move Shadow Ball. I feel like he would give us too much of an advantage for some of the battles that are supposed to be the most difficult in the game, so I thought it would be better to leave him out of the run. After defeating the Snorlax, I obtain the item finder from one of Professor Oak's aides, and I use it to dig up a rotten apple core that Snorlax was sitting on. I make my way into Fuchsia City and head to the Safari Zone, and unfortunately, we run into a Paris, which I catch and I name Baguette, after remembering how to use Google to make sure that I spell the words correctly this time. I make it to the end of the Safari Zone and obtain the HM for Surf. Then I return the Golden Teeth to the Warden and get the HM for Strength. I fly back over to Saffron and decide to take on the Fighting Dojo. He sends out Hitmonlee, who has 2 levels on me, but Cerberus takes it out with a fly. Easy peasy. He then sends out Hitmonchan. I go for another fly, but then Hitmonchan hits us with Sky Uppercut, which hits Cerberus while in the air and takes her down to 19 HP. Thankfully, Cerberus hits Fly and takes out Hitmonchan, but if she had missed, that would have been the end of Cerberus. After the battle, I'm allowed to take a Pokemon, and I choose Hitmonlee, who I named Bruce. With that close call at the Fighting Dojo and some big battles coming up, I decide to get the entire team up to level 40, and get the TM for Shadow Ball in the game corner and teach it to Baxter in preparation for the battle with Sabrina. Before that though, I head to Silphco instead of helping defeat Team Rocket. Bud is waiting for us around the corner because he's still salty about constantly losing to us. He convinces himself that this time, it's different. Spoiler alert, it's not. We lead with Baxter and he leads with Pidgeot, who lands Quick Attack before going down to a Thunderbolt. Once again, this fool sends in his Gyarados because he refuses to learn from his mistakes, and it goes down to the might of Baxter as well. He sends an Execute, and I swap into Bowie so I can save Baxter for his Alakazam. Bowie takes it out with a Flamethrower after he misses a Stun Spore. Next is his Alakazam, and I send Baxter back in as he goes for Future Sight. Shadow Ball takes out the Alakazam in one hit, and then he sends in his Charizard. I leave in Baxter so he can use a Thunderbolt, and takes him to the red, and manages to paralyze the Charizard as he just goes for Scary Face, and another Thunderbolt wins us the battle. The self-employee that awkwardly watched us battle decides to reward our victory over Butt with a free Lapras, which I name Ness, and this will be the final team member, unless someone dies. I return to Silphco and I head up to face Giovanni again. He sends out Nidorino, and I establish dominance by sending out King Arthur. Arthur then proceeds to knock out his first 3 Pokemon with ease. Then he sends in his Nidoqueen. I go for Dig, which does about half, but she lands a Body Slam which paralyzes. I'm not in crit range, so I decide to stay in and get fully paralyzed. I then get fully paralyzed 2 more times while going for Dig, and decide to switch into Yuka, who finishes her off with a couple of strengths, after I waste a few turns going for Sleep Powder for some reason. With that, Giovanni is defeated. While grinding up Ness, I realize Arthur is the only team member whose name is on all caps for some reason, so I decide to humble the king by taking him down a peg. This next part of the game is a bit tricky, because I'm still new to using a level cap. Koga and Sabrina have the same level cap of 43, so after a bit of planning, I decide to take on Sabrina first. I send out Baxter and he takes out Kadabra and Mr. Mime with Shadow Ball. Next is Venomoth, and to avoid taking damage switching Baxter back in against Alakazam, I decide to stay in, hoping I can take it out with a Thunderbolt. It doesn't, and she confuses us and then heals. Thankfully, after wasting her potions and healing up with leftovers, Baxter takes out the Venomoth and in comes Alakazam. We outspeed the Alakazam and take it out with a single Shadow Ball. I'm pretty surprised that battle went as well as it did. Jolteon is such a good Pokemon, even with its very limited move pool. I immediately head back to Fuchsia City to take on Koga. I decide to lead with Ness, who I taught the TM for Psychic. He sends in his Coughing, and Ness takes it out in one hit. He then sends in Muck, and Ness only does about half, and then he goes for Minimize. Thankfully, Ness lands another Psychic and takes it out. He sends in another Coughing, which also goes down to a single Psychic, and in comes his Weezing, who Ness gets down to the red with Psychic, and he hits us with Smokescreen. He heals twice, and I risk missing due to the accuracy drop, but Ness is a hero and lands every Psychic, earning us the badge. I head to Cinnabar Island to find the secret key so I can unlock the door at the 7th gym. After easily defeating the trainers, I arrogantly decide to challenge Blaine 2 levels under the level cap of 47. I send out Ness, who takes out Growlithe with a Mystic Water Boosted Surf. Then he sends in Ponyta, who hits us with Fire Blast and then goes down to Surf. Next is Rapidash, as he lands another Fire Blast and takes us down to just under half before going down to a Surf. Last one is Arcanine, and I risk a crit and he hits another Fire Blast and we survive on just 3 HP. And just miss knocking it out with Surf. I know he outspeeds me, and even though I think he's going to heal, if he doesn't, Ness will die, so I have to switch him. However, I didn't bother leveling anyone else up because I assumed Ness would just sweep the gym. I decided to send in Baxter, as he's the only one that's close to the same level, and he's got very high special defense and speed. I switch in, and he does indeed go for the Hyper Potion. I go for a Thunderbolt, which does about half. Baxter then tanks a Fire Blast and finishes off Arcanine. That could have been a disaster. As soon as I exit the gym, Bill ambushes me and asks me to sail away with him, and I decline his advances. I have some serious training to do right now, and I don't have time to go on boat rides with strange men, Bill. After correcting my previous mistakes and getting the team trained up, I head over to Viridian City to take on the 8th gym. One more rematch with Giovanni. Unlike Blaine, this battle goes much better. Ness Okos his entire team with Surf, while tanking a couple of Earthquakes from Nidoking and Dugtrio. We win the battle, and earn our 8th and final badge. I get the squad above level 50 and head back over to Route 22, where Butt is once again waiting for us, and because he's a masochist, he challenges us to another battle. I lead with Baxter, and after taking a quick attack, he obliterates his Pidgeot with Thunderbolt. Finally learning from his mistakes, he sends in Rhyhorn this time instead of Gyarados, so I decide to switch in Yuka, who takes it down with Razor Leaf. Next up is Alakazam, so I send in Baxter as he just goes for a Disable because he's a bad trainer, and Baxter knocks it out with a Shadow Ball. I send in Bowie after Execute comes in, and I'm hit with a Sunspore and get fully paralyzed. I consider switching out as he charged up Solar Beam because Bowie has such low special defense, but there was no way he takes me out in one hit, so I stay in and Solar Beam does basically nothing, and Bowie avoids paralysis and takes it out with a Flamethrower. But finally learns what type advantage means and sends in Gyarados, but I send in Baxter once again, and he foolishly goes for Rain Dance as I take out Gyarados with a Thunderbolt. Baxter had just learned the move Thunder, and due to the rain it now has 100% accuracy and he takes out Charizard in one hit, but loses once again, and now that he's out of the way, we can head on to Victory Road. We get through Victory Road unscathed, and we've made it to the Indigo Plateau. I decide on a level cap of 58. Lance's highest Pokemon is level 60. Let's take one final look at the team. First up is Lorelei. I send out Baxter, who takes out her Dugong, her Cloyster, and Slowbro with a single Thunderbolt. Next is Lapras, who survives a Thunderbolt in the red and hits us with Confuse Ray, then heals with a Citrus Berry to take it out of heal range. I decide to stay in, but unfortunately, Baxter hits himself in Confusion. Now I'm in range for a crit, so I switch in Yuka, who tanks a Surf, and outspeeds and knocks out Lapras with Giga Drain. Last up is Jinx, whose only damaging move is Ice Punch, so it's safe to switch in Bowie and take her out with a Flamethrower. I figured having Baxter would make Lorelei pretty easy. Bruno is next. I lead with Ness against Zonix, who goes down to a Surf because he's hot garbage. He sends in Hitmonchan, and outspeeds us and does a ton of damage with Sky Uppercut, as we do just over half with Psychic, so I have to switch out. I don't want to risk Cerberus taking too much damage on the switch in, so I send in Yuka and waste time going for Leech Seed, and eventually come to my senses and go for a return. Hitmonchan is next, and I land a Sleep Powder, so we get a clean switch into Cerberus, who takes him out with the Drill Peck. He sends in his Machamp, who survives Drill Peck in the red and uses Scary Face, then heals out of potion range with a Citrus Berry. Now faster, he hits hard with Cross Chop, but thankfully, no crit, and we finish him off. Last up is another Onix, who goes down to Giga Drain. Even if both Pokemon with type advantage went down, I'm pretty confident Yuka would have won that fight by himself. Next up is Agatha, so I lead off with Arthur, who I gave the TM for Shadow Ball. But Gengar survives it in the red, and then goes for a double team. I was really hoping for the Oko. She heals and we hit another Shadow Ball to the red, and a third takes it out. Haunter does go down to one Shadow Ball, however, and then her other Gengar comes in. Shadow Ball does enough to pop the Citrus Berry as he hits us with Hypnosis, but a Lumberry wakes him up, and we finish off the Gengar. So far so good. I go for a Rock Slide on Golbat, which misses, and he hits us with Confuse Ray, but we break through and we hit the Ice Beam. She heals up and we go for another Ice Beam, but on the next turn we hit ourselves in Confusion, and then Air Cutter takes us below half. So I decide to send out Baxter, who tanks the Air Cutter and finishes off the Golbat. Last is her Arbok, and I don't respect it nearly enough, and it survives the Thunder and does massive damage with Sludge Bomb and poisons us. If that crit, it would have killed Baxter for sure. I send in Yuka to tank another Sludge Bomb and finish it off with Return for the win. The last member of the Elite Four is Lance, but we do have a few Pokemon well equipped to deal with this team. Once again, I lead off with Baxter and take out his Gyarados. He then sends in his Dragonair. I switch in Ness as he just goes for Safeguard. He outspeeds and he lands a critical hit Outrage before going down to an Ice Beam. But that crit damage might make it impossible for Ness to survive long enough to face Dragonite. In my mind at this point, I might have to sack Ness. He sends in Aerodactyl, who takes us to just 46 HP with an Ancient Power, but thankfully, no crit and no Omni Boost, and we take it out with Surf. He sends in Dragonair, and here's where I contemplate sacking Ness. But I decide to send in Yuka, and he tanks a Hyper Beam, which works out really well for us, because now I get a clean switch into Arthur, who I taught the TM for Ice Beam, and he takes Dragonair to the red as he sets up another safeguard. Lance then wastes his potions on the Dragonair, who eventually goes down. Last up is Dragonite, and thankfully, Arthur outspeeds him and hits hard with an Ice Beam. He tanks an Outrage as we both heal off of our Citrus Berries, and Arthur finishes off the Dragonite, and we've defeated the Elite Four. Lance then informs us that the Elite Four was rebranded to the Fab Five, and somehow Butt has defeated all of them before us. So in order to become champions, we must defeat him one final time. Baxter once again leads the way, and this time his Pidgeot doesn't know Quick Attack, so we get a clean one-shot with Thunderbolt before getting hit. He remembers how Type Advantage works, and sends in Rhydon, so I send in Ness, who tanks his Earthquake and KOs with Surf. He sends in Executor, who hits a Sleep Powder on Bowie when I switch him in. He uses Light Screen, but Bowie doesn't care, and lands a critical hit Flamethrower and takes it out. Next up is the Gyarados, so I send Baxter back in, and he hits us pretty hard with Hydro Pump. Thanks to the Light Screen, he survives the Thunderbolt in red, and he goes for a Dragon Rage, taking us to just 64 HP, and then he heals up. I go for another Thunderbolt as the Light Screen wears off, and he heals again, but this time, Thunderbolt takes it out. Next is Alakazam, and I decide to stay in, knowing that Baxter will die to a Psychic if he doesn't OHKO, as nobody else on the team would take a hit from Psychic very well. After one final Shadow Ball that takes Alakazam pretty low, he takes down Baxter with Psychic. Rest easy, soldier. We wouldn't have made it here without you. I decide to send in Cerberus because I think he'll outspeed the Alakazam, and he does, and he OHKOs with the Drill Peck. His last Pokemon is his Charizard, and at this point, there's no way he can beat us. I decide to leave Cerberus in so I can get a clean switch, so he fights to the death and goes down to a Fire Blast. That allows a clean switch into Arthur, who hits a 4-time super effective Rock Slide and takes down his Charizard, and we get the win. Baxter was definitely the MVP of that run. However, everybody did contribute in key battles along the way. I ended up with a pretty strong team, and it made the playthrough pretty easy. If you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing if you did. And if you didn't enjoy the video, I appreciate you hate watching all the way to the end anyways. I plan on doing more difficult runs in the future, such as mono-type challenges, or more difficult ROMs that I've never played before. I also want to apologize for the simplicity of the layout. I'm still new to photo and video editing, and in the future I plan on having the team members, badges, and all that fun stuff up on the screen. I just made a new Twitter, so feel free to give me a follow, link in the description. I would love to hear what kind of challenges you would be interested in seeing, as well as any feedback on how I can improve my content going forward. Let me know down in the comment section or on Twitter. Thank you all so much for watching, and to quote our great rival Butt, I'll smell you later.